Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the book launch reading and celebration for David Cassio's new book, FrogFlyer. My name is Michael Kandawal. I'm the Executive Director of the Muse Writer Center, which you can see behind me, even though it's a virtual background. I'd like to take a couple seconds and talk about the Muse Writer Center with you. So we're a literary center here in Norfolk, Virginia, that has so many wonderful things going on, even during the pandemic, which is slowly going away, thank goodness. We have a wonderful class schedule of online classes, from one-meeting seminars on craft and professional development and research, all the way to 8-week classes teaching the basics or the advanced fiction writing, poetry, screenwriting, songwriting, nonfiction and memoir, comic book writing, and more. We also have some wonderful online events, which is, you're in one of them right now, so thank you for being here. Yesterday, we had a great conversation with Virginia Poet Laureate Louisa Agloria and brand new Arkansas Poet Laureate, Suzanne Rhodes, both of whom are teachers at the Muse. Tomorrow, Sunday, the 27th, we have a virtual Q&A with Kelly Edwards, who's a studio executive who's written a book as well. And for those of you who are interested in screenwriting and the Hollywood system, please check that out tomorrow on Sunday. Everything that we do, including also our information about our outreach, where we go into senior centers, assisted living and memory care. We work with the military and veterans, and we work with gifted and also at-risk youth. All that information, including our class schedule and event schedule, can be found on our website, which is the-muse.org, the-muse.org. And if you're interested in the class and the tuition is a bit high for you, even though it's actually the lowest of all the literary centers in the country, we are the only literary center in the country that makes it our goal to never turn anyone away because of finances. So if you want to take a class and you can't afford it, just register for it and check the tuition help box, and we will make it affordable for you, including giving you a full scholarship. So that's pretty cool, I think. I want to welcome David Cassio. David is a dear friend of mine. And we talked a little bit beforehand, should I read your entire bio? That will take like 5 minutes because he's so accomplished. He's so accomplished. He's a military science fiction thriller writer. He lives here in Virginia. But before he became a writer, he was a distinguished SEAL and pilot in the Navy. And at one point he was voted, I think, a Sailor of the Year. So that's pretty exciting. So he knows what he's talking about. He has taken a lot of workshops through the Muse and other places, and has worked on this novel for a very long time. Dave is not only a fantastic writer, a dedicated American who served our country honorably and with distinction. He's also a kind, wonderful man who goes out of his way to make his friends and even strangers feel welcome and helped. He's just such a great guy. I can't say enough about Dave Cassio. And here's his new book, FrogFlyer. You can buy this book online, and you should. It's a fantastic read. I've read many versions of this book, and I'm very proud now to introduce to you David Cassio, who's going to read from his new work, and then we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. So Dave, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. First, I'd like to read a statement. I appreciate that from you. That's really nice. I'd like to start by thanking the Muse Writer Center, and in particular, Michael Kandawal, for hosting this launch today. I've attended classes at the Muse since 2014, and without the teachers and students and community with the Muse, I wouldn't be here right now celebrating my book launch. It's been a long haul, but I wouldn't have it any other way. When I first found the flyer for Muse in a restaurant in Virginia Beach, I never imagined it would lead to this moment. I've included in the acknowledgement some of the teachers and students that have been influenced by writing over the years. Teachers and writers at the Muse have a sincere interest in making the author's manuscript sing, making a way for a wonderful environment in which writers can present their novels, screenplays, poems, and music. I try to frequent the Muse often, as it is a place for social interaction, peer review, and quiet time getting work done. None of this would be possible without the forethought of a place for community that Michael created years ago. I consider FrogFlyer a story that I wanted to tell with collective improvement from many master storytellers from the Muse. And for that, I am very grateful. Thanks for being here. It means a lot to me, for sure. So now I'm going to read a chapter 19. And the setup for that is there's been a terrorist takeover a cruise ship, and a SEAL who was retired is on board on vacation. And also on the way are some SEALs trying to board the ship on an SDV or mini sub. So with that, I'll start reading chapter 19. Darin placed his hand behind him to readjust his position, but his fingers slipped on the condensation. The SDV had changed depths many times since they left the Jimmy Carter, and movement in the cramped mini-sub had increased. Commander Frederick glanced at his watch and tapped the pilot on the shoulder. "We can't wait any longer. Start your approach." The pilot pushed forward on the torque lever. "Roger, starting approach." The powertrain's electric whine rose in pitch, and Darin braced himself against the pull of G-forces as the SDV increased speed. The commander turned around. "Get the gear ready for climbing. Stand by the hatch, helmets on." Darin put on his helmet and buckled his chin strap. Multiple clicks permeated the cramped quarters while everyone cinched their headgear. He helped Steve release the bungee cords on the caving ladder they would use to climb to the Adventurer. Steve tucked the coiled ladder under his arm. "Makes all those pull-ups worthwhile, doesn't it?" "Yeah, forget that heel-to-toe stuff. 300 meters in closing," the co-pilot said. "It's 2055 and no strobe," the commander said. "Continue your approach at current speed. Be prepared to surface at 100 meters. The pilot flicked a blinking switch on the console. "Sledge reports 100 meters aft and to our starboard." "Tell them we're making our run on target and come alongside," the commander said. "Roger, strike formation passed." Everyone was in position, some on their knees and waiting for the opening of the hatch. Darin could almost count the revolutions of the prop as it made its way through the salty sea. No one said anything. The commander watched the UCAV feed. The initial climb would be key to the success of the mission. Once they were on board, they would have a foothold they wouldn't relinquish. What was the status of the fantail? They hadn't got a signal from O'Connell's strobe. They were counting on him because so many things had to happen. With renewed vigor, Alan let go of the second officer's hand and stood on his own. "Thanks for the help, but now I need everyone to leave the fantail." The second officer put his hands on his hips. "Stephen said you were a real asshole." Alan drew the pistol from his belt and leveled it at the weapon of the second officer. "Your first officer is a traitor, are you?" The second officer put his hands up and retreated a few steps. "I'm not your problem. What do you want?" "I told you, get everyone off the fantail and below decks now." Alan spied Kevin approaching from his left. He swung his weapon to aim at Kevin. "Try me, I'm not in the mood. Put it down." Kevin pointed his flare gun at Alan. "He's one of them, sir. I told you." The second officer pointed at Kevin. "Wait a minute. Be careful." Alan checked his watch. 2057. It was time. The boys were homing in on his position while he dealt with the unknown. He had to decide, and quickly. He couldn't tell the second officer and Kevin the truth. That would risk his brethren during insertion. Alan reached for the IR strobe dangling from his backpack and turned it on. Every second it emitted a high-pitched whine to let him know the device functioned properly. He would have to distract and deflect until the boys were on board. Alan pointed his weapon at each man in varied intervals. "I'm not a terrorist, but I can do this all night if necessary." "I've got it," the co-pilot said. "I'm picking up the strobe, IR on the fantail, 100 meters. Darin's muscles loosened. Nick flashed an enormous grin at him, and he reciprocated. Bring us up, guys, the commander said. Keep it steady at the climb site. Excellent work. The pilot pulled back on the yoke. Surface eye, I'll give you word when we've broached the surface. Darin put his hand on the steel floor to balance himself while the SDV changed its angle of attack. The pilot said, surface in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, open hatch. Nick pressed the button and pulled the lever that opened the hatch. Some residual salt water cascaded down on Nick as Nick climbed up. Glad to be getting out of the red illumination of the SDV, Darin followed at the heels of Nick's boots to the salty air and humidity of the Caribbean. Darin stepped onto the deck. Coated with non-skid, the curved hull featured a flattened platform that stretched to the bow. He caught sight of the ship towering above him, and he scanned its superstructure for any threats. The fantail was dark, however. The rest of the ship was alight in Mystic Cruise Line's glory. Clear and prominent in man-sized letters, just below the guardrail was the vessel's designation, Adventurer. Even with the SDV matching pace with the cruise liner, transitioning from the deck to the hatch to the deck had been difficult. The last thing Darin wanted to do was go for a swim. He moved forward, brought his weapon to bear, and adjusted his stance to counter the SDV's undulations in the rarefied water of the whitewash zone. While the pole and ladder man readied their equipment, he and Nick set security on the Adventurer as best they could in the rolling froth and turbulent waters behind the cruise liner. Having practiced the same procedure before, the sight of the behemoth cruise liner wasn't new to Darin. The passengers and crew being held by terrorists, that was new. The hooking crew was in group hug formation to support the pole man as he attempted to make the hook. Segment by segment, the pole with caving ladder attached extended, and then it wavered until the hook latched onto the fantail's railing. The flexible wire ladder unrolled. Darin detected movement in his peripheral vision. Men poured out of the sledge, intent on making their own assault. 2 is 1, and 1 is none. Nick slung his primary weapon over his shoulder and put his hand on the caving ladder. The first up, he would have to climb without a securing strap for safety and follow the motto of slow is smooth, smooth is fast. What happened to the first officer? The second officer said. He pointed a gun at my wife's head, and a friend of mine took care of business. Your first officer is probably pissing himself right now. Does that change things for you? The confusion in the second officer's posture was clear even in the shadowy night. He lowered his hand to his holstered weapon. I want to believe you. Alan gripped his weapon with both hands and cocked the hammer for single action. I wouldn't do that. Arms up. Don't listen to him, Kevin said. He's the traitor. The second officer snarled. Shut up, Seaman. I'm in charge here. Don't be a fool, Alan said. If I were a terrorist, you'd already be dead. Do we have a choice? Alan motioned them to the stairwell. Not really, if you're smart about it. Come this way. The second officer approached him with hands up, and Alan tightened his grip on his weapon. Interlace your fingers behind your head and turn around, Alan said. As the second officer got closer, Alan tensed with anticipation, but the second officer complied. Alan grabbed the officer's weapon from its holster and placed it in his waistband. A flash of motion to Alan's right. A hook on the guardrail, one he was very familiar with. Too late. The second officer saw it. Go, Alan yelled. You're in danger. Get below. Kevin and the second officer jumped and ran. For a brief second, light flooded the fantail as the ladderway door opened then closed. Alan turned around. The unmistakable business end of an MP5 SD silenced machine gun was aimed at his face. The black-clad warrior whispered, Frog. Alan replied, Flyer. When Darin came over the rail, the entire fantail was clear except for Nick and a man wearing a tropical shirt and shorts, who we assume was their ally, Alan O'Connell. Quickly noting the man's bandaged and bloodied leg, Darin pushed forward and covered the immediate threat, which was the passageway. His brethren came over the railing at the hook sights, and they set the security to cover all threats. One by one, the assaulters climbed over the guardrail from 2 ladders and moved past Alan. Every newcomer to the fantail wordlessly covered a field of fire. The only sound was a slight squeak from Alan's shoes as he shifted his weight. Alan found himself in the middle of the assault. Some of the men had rucksacks, and others carried various waterproof packages, which he assumed were filled with explosive shape charges. The sleek warriors filled the nooks and crannies made by piles of cables and L-shaped supports that extended to the ceiling. A SATCOM radio antenna bloomed from out of nowhere, its attendant swift and without wasted motion. Out of the darkness, a voice said, "Bronze Pike, this is Silver Shark. We have Pontiac." The code word used to tell headquarters the climb and link up was complete. Alan was proud and relieved that he had successfully completed the first part of his tasking. He only had a bit more to do now. A taller shower approached him. "Alan, Commander Frederick, I understand we have a rover. Is that his doing?" The commander dipped his head towards Alan's leg. Alan extended his hand and the commander shook it. "Yes, about 10 minutes ago and down that passageway," he pointed to the ladderway. The commander said, "PJ, my position, front and center." Immediately, a figure with a large backpack left his cover position on the deck and appeared in front of Alan. "Check his leg and give him something for the pain," the commander said. "Roger." The pararescue men then addressed Alan. "You allergic to anything?" "Not that I know of." Alan preferred to having an Air Force PJ look at his leg more than anyone else. While the PJ went to work on Alan's leg, Commander Frederick put a hand on Alan's shoulder. "What do we need to know?" "The rover has body armor and a semi-automatic. He's a bearded, pudgy, Latino-looking guy. I just chased the second officer and his crew below decks. I don't think they're in with the first officer. Last I checked, the route to Bahamas Lounge was clear." "Where's the first officer?" the commander said. "He's disarmed and restrained in stateroom 1210. My wife and a few others are guarding him." The commander turned. "Overwatch ND on me." 2 figures rose out of the shadows and posted themselves in front of Alan. Their web gear bristled with magazines, grenades, and door charges. Alan recognized the closest SEAL as the one who had challenged him. "This is Darin and Nick, Overwatch and point man for the squadron. Tell them how to get to the position where you took the pictures," the commander said. While Alan explained the casino access to Darin and Nick, half of the assaulters headed forward along the passageway while covering all fields of fire. They moved quickly and quietly, and before long, the last man of the train faded into the distance. The PJ finished, gave Alan a fist bump, then dropped 2 pills in Alan's hand. "Here's some Tylenol. That coagulant should help. You'll be all right." After giving Alan a canteen to wash back the drugs, he moved silently back into the shadows. Darin and Nick took their stations, ready to move. "Gotta go now," the commander said. "You've done well here, but there's no more for you to do. Get to 1210. Hoo-yah, Alan." The commander extended his hand. Alan shook it. The tall warrior signaled for an advance, and the remaining men on the deck started the trek to the Bahamas Lounge. Alan regretted he hadn't had enough time to secure a route to the bridge for the assault team that had left earlier. The last man headed to the Bahamas Lounge turned back and gave a thumbs up. Alan returned the gesture before the man melted away in the blackness. After limping over to the railing, Alan peeked over the side. Sharp lines came into focus as 2 side-by-side SDVs kept pace with the cruise ship in the whitewash of the turbulent waters. They seemed longer and wider than Alan remembered, reinforcing the fact he had retired years ago. Those young faces, intent on his description of the casino access, were his in the past. But it wasn't over. He had to get back to Janice and see what was happening. The boys would come for the first officer later. Oh shit, Janice is going to kill me for getting shot. And that concludes chapter 19.
Thank you, Dave. That's pretty cool, man. We're going to start our Q&A now. And if anyone has a question and you're watching in the webinar, please use the Q&A button to ask your question. And if you're watching on Facebook, write their question in the comments, and Susan, our program manager, will find them and send them to me. So let me start with the first question in the Q&A from Christy. What inspired you to write your first novel?
That's a great question. Long time ago, 1986, I was on the ground doing an actual stock. And for those who read the first chapter, it was kind of true what was happening there. I noticed a lot of bugs. And I continue to notice a lot of bugs, so much so that I just was amazed by it. And a spark and a story grew in my mind for something that I could write later. I didn't have the background for writing nothing but technical papers, but at that point, I had a story to tell, and it just came together years after that. So.
Very cool. So let me just dive a little deeper in there. So when did you decide you wanted to become a writer?
I'd say about 2013. I had the idea of the story for a long time, and I like to write. I had a few things that I've written before, but 2013 was, I guess, the year that I really decided that I had a chance to do it. And when I found that flyer, it just took off from there. It was just gangbusters after that, because the Muse really is a great place for, learning.
Very cool. So I wanted to say a couple of things to those of you who are watching. So science fiction is a very broad category. So this book is hard science fiction because it's really using science to propel the fiction forward. Dave is also I don't know if there's a term for it, a space science fiction writer as well. So the next book he's working on, some of you have asked that question, the next book he's working on has an alien probe, and that sets everything in motion. But I won't give away your second book. Yeah, because science fiction is so broad, Dave. So how did you, tell me what your thoughts are on the nature of science fiction in your writing?
As far as the nature of science fiction in my writing, I use my experience as a SEAL, but I've always read science fiction and fantasy books. So I wanted to incorporate some of that and not have, the straight, maybe nonfiction and some of the fiction books that are full of acronyms. I wanted to use science fiction in a book so that people could understand what I'm talking about. And, it's one of my loves of life is science fiction. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of the acronyms, so you have a lot of, so you have when you're writing a thriller that is very specific to the SEAL teams, which you have a lot of experience in, how do you negotiate making it accurate and having detail, but also pushing the story forward, and having a lot of accurate descriptions of what's going on and maybe even of the science, but pushing the story forward? And how do you also avoid the government coming back and saying, hey, you just gave a secret away?
Yeah, you know what, that's one of the hardest things I had to do was figure out how am I going to get the SEALs from point A to point B without getting anything away. So a lot of the action is not what really would happen, and I can't go into what really would happen, but I added enough generic but yet action-packed stuff so that people wouldn't get bored with the elements of how they actually did stuff.
Right.
Going from them getting recalled to all of a sudden they're by the ship is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get as close as I could without going over the line of giving away secrets, so that it would be, kind of adventurous.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go to some of the Q&A questions in the webinar, and Sean has a question that sort of follows up to this. Have any fellow SEALs that you serve with read the book, and if so, what did they say about it?
Yeah, there's quite a few, actually. Matter of fact, Sean Chittick, I don't know if that's Sean that's asking the question.
It's a different Sean, yeah. But
yeah, there's been quite a few. Matter of fact, this morning I got an email from a guy I went through BUDS, or Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL School, through. I haven't seen him since 1986, and he reached out through my website and said he had read the book and liked it, and that made me feel really good, because as a SEAL, sometimes we can look at things, and hopefully that you can get over some of the technical aspects of the book,
right.
And feedback on that. But it was a good thing to hear some SEALs come back and say they liked it. So
awesome. I'm going to combine two people's questions, Emily's question and Mike's question. What do you hope people take away from your novel, and will there be a sequel to it?
Well, I thought about this for a long time. The three things that I'd like to take away from this novel is there's 24/7, every day of every year, there are people stationed around the world that are protecting our freedoms. That was one of the things. The other thing is that you notice there's a lot of religious aspects and spiritual aspects in my book. And I think it's important to realize that when military go into battle, it's a really important part of being ready.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing being all the creatures on this earth. If we lose bees, then we're in big doo-doo. So every creature that's in the earth has a purpose. So that was the third thing. And what was the other part to your question?
And is there going to be a sequel?
Oh, well, I've taken some characters from the first book, and they're in the second book that I'm writing. So it's kind of a sequel, but not really. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, so that's I think a really smart move, that maybe not a sequel to this specific plot, but a sequel in terms of the characters evolving along in their life and their career.
Right.
Exactly. So there's a couple questions that kind of go over some similar things. Denise asks, your professional experience and personal details is evident in your book. When you wrote the book, did you model one of the characters after yourself in one way? And I have sort of an addendum to that question. How much of you is in each of these characters? And also, how much of your experience as a SEAL is in this book?
As far as the characters go, like Michael has said, I find some of myself in both Alan and Darin, not so much Nick, but me as an older retired guy with Alan, and some of my younger years, I relate to Darin. So yeah, I do find the experience I have is definitely a big part of it, because some of the easiest parts of writing this book was going from recall to what happens every step of the way to get to the SEALs going on to the ship. So that was easier, but the hard part about it was keeping stuff out of there that wouldn't risk, identifying anything that was secret or whatever.
Right. So you think that there's different parts of you in each of the main characters.
Yes.
And so Alan is sort of inspired by you in retirement, but what about Janice? Mike Krentz wants to know.
Janice, there's some people that I know that I might or might not have tailored them after, some personalities that I know. So I'm not going to give away any secrets, but Janice I wanted a strong character in the book that was female. I think that's a strong part of a good relationship. So, and I think she was in this book. So, yeah.
So let's talk about female characters. Lynn also mentions this in the chat that she thinks you have very strong dialogue and characterization for your female characters, and you said that was important to you. And I know in your early drafts of your new book, it sort of has become almost a female character book in some ways. So tell me why that's important to you, and how you have been able to tap into that voice.
Well, as far as I don't want to be a writer who has readers going through a book and they just get bogged down with acronyms and military jargon. I wanted this book to be something that could be read by everybody. So, and I know women like strong women characters, and men do too. So it was important to me to make sure that everyone knew that it's not just the men around that are doing all the bulk of the work. As you see, if you read the book, Janice is an integral part of Alan's support system. So it's very important for me to show that and get that across to the reader. So
cool. Let's veer into your well, John calls it a secondary plot, but I think it's kind of the instigation of the main plot. How did you come up with the idea of bees and controlling insects and what that means, and what is, how did you find that?
Well, my dad is an acoustical engineer, so he's very into physics and stuff like that. So a lot of influence from him, and the fact that several iterations on how to try and figure out, why there were so many bugs on the ground, and it just kept on thinking about what could cause all these bugs to be so grounded in this one place. And then I had a thought of other things like cell towers being a source of attraction, and it just went from there. So I took a lot of classes in aviation maintenance school that dealt with radio frequencies and stuff. So I knew a little bit about it, and I thought that would be a great twist to a basic SEAL novel having insects involved. So
that's very Michael Crichton-y of you. I mean, I remember your research for this book. You had articles on frequencies from electromagnetic radiation, how they attracted insects or repelled insects, and it's almost like your book is a warning to our security apparatus in this country that, hey, there's a vulnerability here, right?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, it does happen. Some of these tests that have been done are, solidify the fact that EMR, electromagnetic radiation, affects insects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's go to some other questions from the question. here's an anonymous attendee who wanted to know, did you read when you served? And if so, what books did you read when you were on active duty?
I did read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. Robert Jordan, his series, of course, the Tolkien series, Lord of the Rings. I read a lot of Michael Crichton, Stephen King, Terry Goodkind, a lot of fantasy, some science fiction, Ender's Game, Starship Troopers, those kind of things that rounded out my background of reading, but mostly fantasy and science fiction.
Cool. So let's talk about your process. Tell us a little bit about your writing process, Dave. How do you approach writing a novel? Do you plot it out ahead of time? Do you see where it goes? Do you have specific times of the day that you write? Do you have to go to a certain place to write? Like, what is your process like?
My process is kind of a little bit different than some writers. A lot of the times when I write, I have to be in the mood for it. I know, you're supposed to write, sit down and write, but I feel like I get my best production done when I am ready for it. And that entails either going to the Muse or having myself stop the day previous with writing that I could have done in the previous day that I could follow up with the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I use Scrivener, so I do outline a bit. I outline chapters ahead of time, and figure out what kind of outline I'm going to do through that. So that's part of my process. And my best days are days that I don't plan on writing sometimes. I just feel good about what ideas I have. And sometimes they're from left field, I don't understand why they come to me, but I just feel like they're there, and I get, quite a few thousand words down.
Yeah, some of the best ideas come out of nowhere, don't they? I mean, it's like, oh, I could do this instead, and then you sort of see where it leads you. So you're kind of a combo of the one who plots it all out and one who kind of does it on the fly, I think.
Yes, a combination, like a hybrid.
Right. Very cool. So again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, or if you're on Facebook watching live, you can put them in the comments and Susan will see them and send them our way. So on your process of writing, Shelley asks, what helps you overcome writing blocks when you feel stuck in the middle of writing your story?
That's a great question. Like I said before, sometimes I have to be centered and ready to write to overcome the writer's block. But if I really have to write, sometimes going a different place than I am at the time, like the Muse or Panera, or mainly at the Muse because it's quiet. And when I get done with my social events there and stop talking to everybody, I can get somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's a great place to write there at the Muse. But unless I have a deadline, which I have classes with Michael, of course, so that helps. But yeah, sometimes I just try and back it up, and try the next day, because I'm not on a time crunch for anybody to have something written unless it's for class. So I don't usually run into that problem since I'm self-published. So that's what's going on with me.
So do you feel that having a workshop group keeps you motivated in some ways? I mean, or would you be writing this would you be having the same process if there wasn't sort of some deadlines coming at you?
No, I think workshop groups and classes are great for getting things done. Otherwise, you don't have any deadlines. So I think it's important to, I'm in one writers group with a couple people, and then your class, Michael, and so it keeps me going through the writers group and the class. So
For people who aren't familiar with a critique group or a workshop, um, sometimes it can be a little bit daunting, I think, because people are giving you feedback on what you wrote. So how do you approach receiving that criticism? And when we say criticism, we don't mean negative necessarily, but feedback. How do you approach receiving that feedback, those notes? Do you have a structure in your mind of how, some that you use and some that you don't use or you use later?
well, there's times where some of the input is great, some of the input is I'm not sure that I'm going to use that, and the other times the input is something that I'm not going to listen to. So it's all good though. I mean, everybody's got a different kind of background. Most of the students and classmates and writers and teachers give great feedback. So most of the stuff is taken right in, and I'll use it right away. And once in a while, some of the feedback is they don't know what's going to happen future in the plot, so it's kind of you just go over it and not, but just continue on.
There's a lot of people just basically saying in the chat how proud they are of you. Emily, all the way from California, Aunt Reen, Matthew, Emily, Jen, Chris, Everly, Lainey, Molly, and Rory, love you and we're so proud of you. And Lynn says, other people have said wonderful things to you. We already read Lynn's question, but there's a couple of funny questions I kind of want to get to because I like funny questions. So Denise asks, will the character Denise in your first book be in the next novel on a big mission?
Denise has already been on missions, so she knows what exactly to do. That's an inside joke between me and her.
Okay.
Definitely been on missions. She'll continue to go on missions, and maybe she'll be the heroine and rule the day in the next book.
Okay. An anonymous attendee asks, who would be the better SEAL, Sean Gerben or Michael Candlewall? I would say probably neither of us, but yeah.
Well, it would be harder for Michael, for you,
Yeah.
to get in some of the cramped places that I've been into. But Sean, with his open-toed soles, that would be hard too.
That's true. But Sean is less tall than me, so he could probably fit into the spaces.
Yeah, Sean could fit into places.
He could be pretty feisty, so he could really get the action going.
Yeah, he can keep everybody entertained just like you do. So
okay. So Christy asks, what's your favorite part of the novel writing process?
That's a good question. What's the favorite part of a novel writing process? Well, I have to say, I went to my in-laws the other day, last week or so, whenever it was. And my father-in-law was so excited about the book. I was just taken back a little bit. He kept on going over each part of the book that he liked. And so it was fun to see someone as excited about the book as I was, even more so. So that I would say feedback from someone who really liked the book is the favorite part of my novel process.
Okay. And Shelley asked sort of a other side of the coin question. What was the biggest hurdle you experienced when writing the first book?
Oh, just craft. My first few iterations at writing weren't that good. And over the years, it's been like 8 years now that I've been writing Muse. Those were hurdles. And I'd say one of the other big hurdles was trying to get action into the book without giving away secrets. So that was pretty hard too. I'd say those two things were probably the toughest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The query process for going traditional publishing was hard too, because it took a lot of time and effort. But then I decided to go self-publishing, and that was actually a pretty quick process.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a self-published author, you have to do everything yourself. You hired an artist to do the cover and designed the interior. What was that like? Did you have several artists you reached out to? How did you choose what was on the cover? That kind of thing.
Well, as far as the cover goes, I had exactly what I wanted in mind, and I knew exactly what it's going to look like. And so I just had to find somebody that could do it for me. And I ran into Jerry Todd through a website called Reedsy, where they give you artists and illustrators that work doing the cover artist thing. And I found him, and I decided to see if he could do it for me. And he does James Patterson's books, so he's been an established artist. So I wanted the cover to be really good, and I think it turned out really well. And as far as the copy editing goes, I found my copy editor through a website also, and she was military, and I wanted a military copy editor so she could screen some of the things that I had.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a pretty easy process, but it just took a while for each iteration of the different times that he added to the cover. It took a while, but he finally got it down. It was really, really good.
Okay. Lynn has a follow-up to the question we asked about hurdles. What part of the book specifically did you have the hardest time writing?
I think the whole conclusion for me was hardest to write, because I didn't want to write a regular conclusion. I wanted to do something different, and that's why I wrote some of the shark bait stuff. I felt like I felt like things don't go to plan as planned most of the time. So the ending of the book was kind of hard for me to figure out what I wanted it to actually do. And I finally figured it out, and I thought that I should end it this way just because of my thoughts on the matter. So.
Okay. Carrie asks a question. Do your characters ever surprise you with how they react to a scene you want to put them in, or did you have it all planned out before you write the scene?
No, my characters are surprising me all the time, especially Esteban in the book. If you haven't read it, he's the antagonist, the bad guy, pretty much. And it was hard to get into his head, but I feel like it came to me pretty well, and that worked out. But as far as the characters go, a lot of pantsing, which is, off the cuff kind of thing. So, yeah, I didn't really have it all planned out. I knew what would happen. As far as the takedown was concerned, that was easy for me, but the characters doing different things, that was kind of the change that I saw.
I remember in class years ago when we would get an Esteban submission, we were always very excited because it was just fun to read Esteban. He was so evil and but quirky at the same time. It was very very funny. So what did you, Denise wants to know, and so do I, what did you learn about yourself when you wrote this book?
Okay. Well, as far as what did I learn about myself, I learned that if you stick to it and you just keep on writing, you can get things done. And I think the biggest thing about this book, no matter how the sales do or anything like that, I got a real good sense of completion at being done with my novel. So I learned that I could stick with it. And over years of honing my craft, that, I completed and I made a novel that people are reading out in the world. So that gives me a good sense of completion, and it makes me feel good.
I was muted. I have a question. So what is the biggest or best piece of advice that you were given as you were developing your craft? And what is the best piece of advice you might give to others who want to become writers?
I think it was very important for me to go to the traditional route, meaning going through a publisher at first, because I got all my book cover jacket, synopsis, all the PitMat is a Twitter pitch party for agents, where you type in a small description of your book. All those things led to, my book cover jacket and having things ready for self-publishing ways of doing it. So my biggest suggestion for people is to get in a community, get in a group like the Muse, if you want to write, and just keep at it. Just get as immersed as you can into a community of writers and teachers and students, because you'll learn a lot. I know I've learned a lot over the years, and it's really been beneficial for me, that's for sure.
I think sometimes people don't realize how much, if they're not writers, how much work goes into a book, with revisions and how many drafts, how many, and you can count even a revision where you just change one comma, like how many versions did this book have before you were satisfied with it enough to put it out there?
Oh, wow. Well, from start to finish, pretty much, I workshopped this book at the Muse for 7 years. So from beginning to end, I couldn't tell you how many iterations it was for drafts, but I would say 6 or 7 drafts, full drafts,
Mm-hmm.
of changing things, but a whole lot of workshopping that I had to go back. I've got a Tupperware container full of drafts of scenes that I have. It's full. It's a big one of those big containers, and it's full of scenes that have been workshopped and critiqued that I've gone through, and I've kept it the whole time, so I can go back and look at the old drafts and say,
Right.
okay.
So how many words do you think you cut out of it? I mean, like, over the years. I mean, is because a lot of writers think that like their first or initial drafts are very large and they kind of pare it down. They pare it down to the essential. So how much are we not reading, I guess is the question.
I'd say about 25,000 words that we're not reading.
Mm.
It would have been over 100,000 probably.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like 82,000 at the end. So yeah, a lot of scenes have been changed, and things have been tightened up, and the work that the other students have helped me with is just beyond belief. So, yeah, it's been really good.
So we're getting close to the end of time. I know that the pandemic has altered our plans for you having a reading. We were, but we might have something in person later in the year. So if people want to get their book signed, you're often at the Muse certain days. And are you going to be at MarsCon? I forget if you're going to be at MarsCon.
Yeah, I'll be at MarsCon. I'm not staying.
So,
but I'll be there at MarsCon. Yeah.
So you maybe bring a couple of books for people to buy just in case, and people might want to get their book signed if they have it with them. Once we relax our COVID restrictions at the Muse, Dave will be hosting again. I'm just speaking for you, and there could be set days that you can be like Dave is hosting and doing an autograph table at the same time.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I will be hosting back at the Muse once this COVID thing gets done.
Yeah, lots of people want to get their book signed in the chat, it looks like. And also Dave will be in Philadelphia at AWP after MarsCon. And we could always have you have a little book signing at our booth at both at MarsCon and at AWP. So maybe you should bring some books to MarsCon and we can have you sit there and you could sell and sign some books.
Sounds good. Yeah, I bought some books at cost, so I can do that.
Cool. Okay, well, yeah, so it's a deal. So just talk to Sean about that, and he will set up a time where Susan and where the table can be the Dave Cassio signing table. That's very exciting to me. I love this. This is so great. I'm so proud of you and so happy for you. I just want to remind everybody out there that when you heard Dave reading his book, that's his book. So please don't use it without buying it. You should buy it and read it. It's all his original work. And if you want to use an excerpt, get his permission first. Sorry, there's more chats. People are chatting. People are thanking you for their service and giving you hooyahs. Great job of blending tactics and humanity in the book. People were very impressed. We're all very impressed, Dave. I just want to say, as we conclude, to thank you, Dave, for reading for us, for sharing your insights on writing and the process. It was really cool to hear. I'm very happy that we both have. I put on my FrogFlyer background too, so we're there, and I have it right in front of me as well. It's funny because when you're on Zoom, it mirrors your screen, so it looks like it's saying FrogFlyer, but it really says FrogFlyer. So yeah, we're also happy for you, Dave. And I want to just remind everyone watching that the Muse Writers Center is a full-service literary center here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, but we reach the whole world. And I forgot to mention, and I was reminded, that this semester, all of our youth classes are also free. You don't even have to ask for tuition help. So please check out the schedule and our event schedule. And Kelly Edwards is going to be our next event tomorrow on Sunday, the 27th, talking about the Hollywood industry. So check out everything about the Muse on the-muse.org, the-muse.org. We'd love to connect with you, and we're open 4 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 to 7, and Saturday, 10 to 4. If you want to come by and check the place out, meet Dave and other authors who hang out there. And also you can use a spot in the Muse to write like Dave does. We would love to have you there. And of course, using the Muse when we're open is free of charge. We're here for the community. So once again, as a round of applause, although you can only hear my clapping. Thank you so much, Dave, for reading for us and for being part of our Muse community, a really important part of our community at the Muse. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you for hosting this.